You nailed the call on the GDP target. Many economists we spoke to said they were going to drop the target this year. You said no, they're going to set it at above 6%. That's what we got. What does it tell us about the priorities for policymakers going forward?
Right. Tom, I would say that the reason why that we think policymakers in China would not necessarily throw away this annual growth target is because that ultimately they have a longer term goal, which is by 2035 they have to double the GDP growth by then. And how can you get rid of the annual numbers, the annual checks, if you have such a long term goal and a pretty ambitious one? Because on average you have to have 4.7% of growth at least per year for 15 years. So would you say that, okay, I want to go to Harvard one day, but you know what, let's get rid of all the final exams from now? I would say that would be difficult. So I think that in terms of the goals, the setting was mainly to basically set the expectations at a level that policymakers feel comfortable, especially consistent with their long-term goal. But this is not to say that they're going to sacrifice the quality of growth and go for the quantity. I think that as they emphasized for 14th five-year program, they very much think productivity gains are important.
Is there anything that you've heard today, Helen, that informs your view of the trajectory of monetary policy?
Well, I think that the overall policy stance has been reiterated, prudent. And in fact, I'm afraid that it's such a very nice word, calling it a prudent monetary policy stance will probably stay over here with us forever. Since it was first introduced in 2013, I think this particular adjective has never left, because it has been such a nice word to describe where the monetary policies is supposed to be. This tells us very little. What tells us more is about the details in the working report that says M2 growth and also total social financing growth has to be consistent or roughly in line with the nominal GDP growth. If we are expecting real GDP growth to be somewhere around 8.5%-ish, and let's give or take put on GDP deflator by about 2 percentage points, that basically means nominal GDP growth will be roughly around 10 to 10.5-ish. And if that is the case, given where total social financing growth was last year at 13% plus, that basically implies we will see some modest, tightening on the monetary side. But we think that would not necessarily be immediately coming. It would be more like a second half the story.
Helen, David here. We were speaking with Michael Pettis about an hour back from Tsinghua, and what he basically said to Tom's earlier point and just yours just now is setting a target was also political. The reason I bring that up is when you look, say, at the path of China moving forward, do you think local governments are more independent now in setting their own economic agenda? And is that going to be trickier for Beijing then moving forward to plan an economy that's just getting more complex?
Well, there is this conflict indeed, but there are, I think the central government's pull and also the push in every single way will still influence the local governments, I would say, continuously going forward. But setting the economic goal is only a very simple part of it. For example, if the central government says above 6%, then if you were a local government official at a certain province or city, would you set your goal significantly above or significantly below? Probably not a good idea. And you have to basically round up your numbers somewhere in the range around this level, and at the same time consider what this means to your budget and also other target levels for local government day-to-day operations. That's why this is very much necessary. But this is also not separated from the overall relationship between central and local governments. We have seen that from a fiscal perspective, the Ministry of Finance has been fighting to get a little bit more fiscal resources to the central level, while local governments were left more with the responsibilities and however with fewer resources to satisfy them. And as a result, they have to borrow, and you've come up with this local government borrowing problem that has been plaguing us for a long time. So this kind of stress and also conflicts will probably continue, but we think that the central government still, at the moment in China, still very much is the most important policy setting, agency that everybody has to look up to, and people will have to look up to their goals to set up the local government's agenda.
One of the objectives that they set, I'm just going to read a headline here, China's aiming to achieve an appropriate birth rate. Not sure how they're going to do that. But my question to you is, demographics or debt, Helen? What's a bigger challenge for Beijing?
Well, between the two, I would say that the demographics is probably harder to fix than even the debt, because if you think about, these two problems that all the time people have been saying that China would probably get killed in growth as a result of demographic crisis or as a higher debt. Actually, I think the latter probably has an easier fix, which is China needs to get more, quality growth and get the productivity gains, and so that its overall nominal GDP growth recovers. The debt to GDP ratio would get help because the denominator, i.e., the nominal GDP growth, would accelerate and more than offset the gains from the credit creation. However, I think demographics is a harder story. As we just published a piece today, we found that post-COVID, China's number seems to suggest that they had a baby bust in the year of 2020. And if you look at all these previous records of all these relaxation of the family planning policies, from one-child policy to two-child policy, and also look at all its neighbors, for example, Japan, Korea, on what they have done. Unfortunately, just relaxing the birth controls is not going to be enough. We think that China really needs to do a lot of that to help in the near future, and including to provide incentives to offer to Chinese moms at reproductive ages, so that they can be more encouraged to have more babies.
So important, as you say, not an easy fix. Of course, the demographics tying into the labour market. What is the tightness in the labour market here in China? They set out a plan to add an additional, 11 million urban jobs by the end of this year.
Well, yes, the employment goal has been revised from last year's 9 million new jobs and also 6% or so unemployment rate. But we think that the new goal, 11 million new jobs and also 5.5% unemployment rate, is very much achievable. If you look at the end of 2020, what they have achieved is already close to that, especially when you look at unemployment rate down to 5.2%. So actually, it is not going to be extremely challenging, given that the job market, the labor market so far still seems to be relatively tight. But of course, China would need to face the new challenges, for example, in terms of promoting higher income growth. Not only you need to give people the jobs, but also you need to see that the jobs keep paying them more and more. So I think the income growth, is very important this year, despite the better outlook in labor market already since the second half last year. We found that household, income level still slightly below where we were at the end of 2019, so before COVID.